My name is Chloe Friedman, and I'm a public relations and communications professional. I may not have all the answers, but I'm willing to find them out with you. I'll help you communicate with yourself and others to find your goals and reach your dreams. I'm an expert in organization and prioritization. Visit winggirlpr.com for more information and follow me on Instagram at winggirlpr. Now, take the journey and find your wings. Hi, everybody. So today I invited one of my BFFs, Colleen Carney, to join me on the podcast, and that's because I was actually inspired by one of her blog posts. She runs a blog called Joy in the Journey, and she's a travel nurse. She is a registered nurse certified in the operating room, also has her bachelor's in nursing, and her blog is always so inspirational, and I love the different unique perspectives that she takes and the lens that she writes through about all of her different experiences and her travels. And so it felt very fitting to invite her to talk about the journey. When I think of the journey, I have always been a person who tended to focus on the destination. And I think in the last couple years, I've had some shifts in my life that have taught me to be more present, be more in the now. And that is always a work in progress. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about her travels and her takeaways and, you know, how to just embrace the journey.
First of all, I want to say thank you because you're a nurse and these have been tough times, and we're coming off of Nurses Week and it's been hospital week. So thank you to you for being a healthcare worker, and thank you to all of the healthcare workers out there.
Thanks, Flo.
What made you decide to become a nurse?
So I knew I always wanted to do something in the medical field because I have such a huge passion for my personal health and the idea of like a healthy lifestyle. So with my mom being a nurse, you know, it definitely nudged me towards nursing. And I think it really took hold after, you know, my anatomy and physiology class in school. And I was able to actually see like the structures and the functions of how the body works and like how it's all tied together to make life. Like, I think it's so fascinating. You know, as far as going into the operating room, like that specialty kind of stuck out in my brain during my preceptorship. You know, they never really forced us into the OR. It was always go do your training on like a med-surg unit, which is just like a general floor in the hospital. And they actually had one day where we were able to float into the OR and go watch a surgery. And I just remember after seeing my first surgery, I was like, oh my God, like I have to be here. I have to be involved. Like somehow it was like just so amazing. And I still remember like all the details of it. You know, it was a knee replacement. I won't go into like the gory details because for everyone who has weak stomachs, like I'm sure you don't want to hear about this, but like it was just
thank you.
like it was just so amazing to like be able to fix and heal patients with surgeons' hands and like tools. Like it's just so crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember, so we were roommates and you would come home, and I feel like I always tell this story to explain my weak stomach, but we'd be eating dinner and you'd come home from work and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I had this surgery today. Let me tell you about it and all the details. And I'm like, can you not right now, please? And I remember when you were in school, nursing school, how hard you had to work and like all the memorization in some of those classes and like very long hours of studying.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was like my life, but definitely so rewarding now and so worth it.
Yeah. And speaking of rewarding, you have now one of the coolest jobs, I think, which is you've gotten into travel nursing. How long have you been a travel nurse? And was there Can you kind of explain what that is? And was there one moment that made it click for you and made you decide that that's what you want to do?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, like travel nursing is basically, it's a concept where, it developed in response to a nursing shortage. So hospitals that didn't have enough nurses, they started hiring on travel nurses just to get them through like a short period when they literally did not have the help that they needed. So I've been doing it for about 3.5 years. And I've traveled, I started in 2017. I traveled to Jacksonville first, and then we traveled to just outside of Boston. We went to New York, we went to Philly, Austin, Fort Lauderdale, and then now we are in Atlanta. So we've kind of been all over, and it's just been so much fun and an awesome experience. After a few years in my first nursing job in Fort Myers, Florida, just where I graduated, I definitely had gone as far as I could, like in that hospital there, and I started getting a little nervous about complacency. And like I began to feel like, when you're sitting at a red light in your car and like the car next to you starts creeping forward and like you feel like you're rolling backwards almost. Like that's how I felt in my job there. Like I felt like I was becoming stagnant or almost like regressing. So I definitely felt like I needed to move on. And in my mind, like especially in the medical field, you have to keep moving. If you're not going forwards, like you're going to go backwards because the rest of the world is going to continue on. Like the innovations are constant in the medical field, and you definitely have to stay on the cutting edge. Well, no pun intended.
I feel like I like that analogy a lot because even not just with the healthcare and medical field, but like if you don't go forward, you're going to go backward. And the car analogy, because I think that's, you verbalize the feeling we all get when we have like an internal push to go do something or change our path. So it's cool that you like recognize that, and it brought you now almost 4 years later, you've been on this cool journey because you just recognized that feeling and said, I need to push myself,
Yeah, like the first time I realized it, I went to a nursing convention in California, and they had like all these booths set up for information about travel nursing and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do this. Like this has to happen. So I like came home and talked to Colin about it. I was like, we definitely need to go and make this happen. And like, we talked about it, and we were like, 10 months later, we were on the road to Jacksonville. It's just awesome.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Colin is your boyfriend. And I know you referred to we earlier traveling. So you want to talk a little bit about that so everyone listening, understands you kind of have this ideal situation where you both can travel and enjoy the destinations together.
Yeah, for sure. So Colin and I travel together, and we both kind of worked at it at first to try and figure out how we could make it happen. And he was able to get his company to let him work remotely. So once that became like a realization, he was like, yes, we need to do this, and he was able to just work from his computer at home everywhere we went. And so we basically kind of chose the places we wanted to go. We would just look at a list that my recruiter would send over and be like, what sounds fun? Where should we go? And that's kind of how we did it at first.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like when you go to each place, like something that you do in every city, or is there like, I want to say like a ritual, but that's probably not the right word, but something you do to kind of dig in and start to explore each place, or do you just kind of do what you're feeling?
I like to make a little list of like, I research the place we're going first, and I make a little list of like, okay, these are like the must-sees. Like we have to go and do this. It sounds super cool. And like, I look up, we use this website called Thrill List, and we always look on there and see like the best restaurants to eat at, the best spots for drinks, or just, best nature trails, things like that. National parks. Like we love to go and do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the both of you like to dig in and you're just hungry for everything. You try all the food and you like the outdoor things. You like a little bit of everything, which is cool that you guys have that and you can share that and talk about your experiences. So you mentioned researching, and that reminds me. So you're just, obviously this all takes a ton of planning. And you said when you guys decided in 10 months, you made it happen. So in those 10 months, you were obviously very strategic and prepared and as organized as you could be. But with travel nursing, it is a total career shift where you can't always just have the plan together. I know sometimes you're waiting and you have to make a decision and it's down to the wire, or you're trying to find an Airbnb and your current place ends like in a week and it's crunch time. So I know you and you're a planner. So how do you deal with this fly by the seat of your pants, and how have you managed to literally go against your nature and grow?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sometimes it is super last minute, like with these travel contracts, and you literally have a week before you're like, okay, where are we moving next? Like, we don't have anything lined up. And it is scary sometimes. But honestly, this is like part of the reason why I did start travel nursing. Like, again, I noticed my coworkers being complacent in their job, and it scared me. Like, as a nurse, you should never feel comfortable going into like an open heart surgery, feeling comfortable in your job. Like, that should not be a feeling you have. Like, you should always be on the edge of your seat, like ready for the worst case scenario, because it is like life or death for my career. Like, and I think because I'm such a planner, like I do like to be in control. And since I started travel nursing, I was kind of forced out of my comfort zone. And it allowed me to adapt to like so many different things that were completely out of my control. And it definitely has helped me grow as a person and in my career.
Yeah.
And, that kind of reminds me of this video we watched the other day. Colin's been getting into watching this guy called Casey Neistat. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he does all these like motivational videos and stuff. And he had this great analogy of called the Tarzan model. And essentially it's saying like you start off on one side of the jungle and you're trying to swing to get to the other side of the jungle. There's no such thing as a straight path. Like, you have to swing from vine to vine. Each vine might take you higher. Some might take you lower. Sometimes they go backwards. But each time you grab onto a new vine, you've moved forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. And I feel like that's like perfect for this. Like, and sometimes sometimes when you swing backwards, like that just gives you more momentum to catapult forward. I just thought it was such a cool analogy.
Funny you bring that up, because that's actually something my boss has said. I don't know if he's saw that video or if it's something that he's just picked up from his experience, but he always tells me, he's like, Chloe, I don't care if we're moving sideways or backwards, or you have to take a step back, as long as we're moving. He always says that to me. So when I get like new projects at work, I literally attack them, and I'm not afraid to maybe make a mistake or try something new, because I know like as long as I'm moving the path, like you said, it's not always going to be perfectly straight. You have to like learn things along the way, and you're going to hit road bumps, but that makes you better ultimately.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing with the journey. It's really cool that you I feel like a lot of people don't recognize when they're complacent and they just feel comfortable, and that's enough for them. So I hope that you can inspire someone who's listening to maybe get a little uncomfortable, because that's all about the journey, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
What other lessons, and I'm sure everywhere you go, you just take so much with you. And I've read that in your blog post, a lot of these lessons that you've kind of taken away through your travels. So what are some of your biggest takeaways from each time you move?
I think my biggest takeaways, I have a couple, but I think the first one that comes to mind is traveling light. Like, don't bring a lot, because like you learn very quickly what the essentials are after having to pack and move it every 13 weeks. It gets exhausting. And every move, like you have the opportunity to pare down and just donate some stuff, get rid of it. Like you don't actually need this. And it definitely comes in handy when you're living in sometimes like 400 square foot apartments. Like you never know what you're going to get. So it's definitely helpful. And if we weren't a couple of minimalists before this, we definitely are now. And that kind of brings me to my next one about, I think remaining open-minded and being adaptable. That is definitely huge when you're moving to new cities, new hospitals that have new policies that you never even heard of before, and you're moving your home every 3 months. You just have to. And it's funny because I was talking to my mom the other day, and she reminded me of a quote. It was fit the moment very perfectly about what we were talking about on the phone. And she's like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. And I was like, that is so true. Like there's very few things in life that you can control. So keeping an open mind and remaining flexible throughout all of this is a great life lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And the next one, I think this is probably the most important one and the one that we we love doing. It's explore. Like don't ever pass up an opportunity to go out and explore and experience the city you're in. Like, yeah, sometimes we didn't feel like going out or like didn't feel like going and doing anything because we were just exhausted from either moving that day or getting ready to move or a long day at work. Like life happens, but like we always forced each other to get out there and just go and like see the sights we want to see, because when it all comes down to it, like we only have 13 weeks. At a couple of points we'd be like, okay, we only have 5 more weekends to do this. Like we have to do it or else we're not going to be able to see it. Mm-hmm. So I think the little timeline there definitely helps get us out there and forces us to like, don't ever pass up an opportunity for fun.
For sure. I love the quote your mom said too. I think that fits this whole topic of the journey quite perfectly. And it's almost like it's not how well you plan, but it's like you can be in control by how you handle the chaos and the unknown. That is your control. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and I think that when you stop and look back, and especially in you guys' scenario, you realize everything has worked out and it all has been part of the plan, and those moments of just writing it out and not knowing we're part of the plan, but that's what makes the journey so cool.
Yeah. Sometimes it's so hard to realize that and just let go and be like, okay, not meant to happen. Like, just let it go. Mm-hmm. He has
And I feel like just knowing you so well, I've definitely seen a change in you and so much growth. And it's been cool from like the outside to watch all of your experiences,
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about your blog. I know that since you've been young, verbal or written communication is something you're super good at, and it's called Joy in the Journey. So I'm going to put it in the description of the podcast so you all can go check it out and find a topic that you want to read about. But what has inspired you to kind of start your blog, and what gives you topic ideas? Are you just going through your day and all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to write about that? How does that all work for you?
I think originally I created the blog just for myself, like as a place to put my own ideas and like to track my travels and experiences while kind of keeping my family and friends like up to date. I would just send it to my mom, be like, Mom, look what we did today. Like, check it out. And then like from there, I started writing more on there, and that is definitely my form of creative expression. And I feel like traveling, it gets hard to do creative things sometimes because we are constantly like, go and see and do and look at all these things. But like, I don't ever get to like express and do like creative like activities, I guess. So writing is definitely one of them for me because I communicate the best through written words. I think basically everyone I know knows this. Like, this podcast is definitely not my strong suit, but I'm doing it for you, Chloe.
But look at you getting uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Part of the journey.
Exactly. But it's always been like that. Like, even when I was a kid, I would not open up to my mom. Like, I was just like so closed off and so quiet. Like, and I remember she got me this little notebook, had like little pink beads on the front of it with like this ribbon with a little heart on the end of it. And she like put it on my bed one day, and she wrote in this little book, like the first entry, she was like, this is a notebook for us to write back and forth, no judgments. Like, you can write anything in here. There's going to be no repercussions, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And so like, we did that for years. Like, we would just write in it, and like, I would write a little note and leave it on her bed. Like, if I had a question that was too personal and I was like so uncomfortable to ask, like, I'll just write in it. Or like any thoughts. It was such a cool idea. Like, I'm so happy that she did that.
Yeah. Do you think that she did that because she recognized that you were a good writer and that's how you preferred to communicate? Or do you think that because you grew up doing that, it made writing like your choice of communication?
You know, I don't know. I was like thinking about that the other day when I started talking about this, but it's like the chicken or the egg, you know, which one came first? I don't know. Did she make me this way by giving me that book? I don't know. I'm probably not.
It's a very perceptive mother, though, to do that.
I mean, for her to realize, like, okay, this girl's not talking to me. I'm going to make her write down in a book.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you and your mom, Chloe, did not have this problem. Being in communications, you were probably like, so easy to just chat and chat and chat.
Both of us were. My mom did a communications degree too, so we just.
That's funny.
She's like, "You want to talk about whatever? We're gonna talk. Let's chat it out right here."
Perfect. But that's like goes back to what we're meant to do. Like, you're in communications, like you're meant to be talking and doing all these things, and I definitely am not. And being in the medical field, like, if I were to ask you to go stand in a freezing cold room and go watch somebody get cut open, like, you would be just as scared to do this podcast as I am.
Well, I would also pass out. So
yeah. I'm on the verge of passing out, Chloe, right now.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about you and Colin and traveling together. What is it like traveling with someone and balancing everything together? And other than your goals together, what gets you through some of those more frustrating moments?
It has its moments, but for the most part, like, me and Colin are such a good team. Like, you know, he was so on board with it right away to do this travel nursing. Like, not everyone would be like, okay, yeah, let's up and leave and just go and do this thing. Like, he was just on the same page with me, you know? And he already had that ability to work remotely, and it just helped us take that initial plunge to get into it. But I think ultimately what made it all possible is that we both had similar or the same goals. So we were still able to continuously like progress, even though we're moving and we're going and doing all these things. Like, we're still able to, you know, have those couple goals and achieve them. And we definitely are goal oriented, and we always have been. But the most important thing I found was with these goals is definitely to hit that reset button and kind of reevaluate and make sure, like, okay, yeah, we've been together for like however long, and just reset and be like, do we still have the same goals? Like, I think it's so important to continuously check in on that. Like, because people change, you never know. I mean, so it's so important to just reset. And going back to actually what Hillary was talking about with communication last week in your podcast, it's definitely a pivotal way to like ensure we're both moving forward. Just keep communicating, keep that conversation going about different goals, whatever you want. So as far as getting us through those frustrating moments, I think it's so important to have a sense of humor. Like, that is one thing that keeps us both sane, because it is like, you do go through crazy times, and like so many things that you're not expecting to happen, and you just have to like go with it. You just got to go with the flow. Like, like there are days when we both got so frustrated, especially they were usually on moving days when we would get so frustrated, like not at each other, just at the situation. But sometimes we would take it out on each other. Like, oh my God, why are we doing this? Like we would question every time, like, what are we doing? Why don't we have a home base? Like, this is crazy. Like we would be packing the car and we'd be like throwing things, like just like, we're like, okay, we're just going to leave this on the street here. Like I remember in Brooklyn, we were like, just leave it on the street. Someone will pick it up. It's not fitting in the car. Like, like at one point it was just so crazy. And like we've moved places and I've literally had the plants on my lap because we didn't have room in the car. Like it's just so ridiculous. And of course you can't leave those plants behind.
I love that you guys move with your plants.
Like so important to us. And also the travel isn't without its hiccups, though finding time for yourself and working to grow as an individual and not just as a couple, that definitely takes some work sometimes, especially when like we're in a new location and we don't know anyone else but each other. Like it's so important for each of us to kind of branch out and kind of either meet people through different activities, or like it's easy for me because I can just meet people at work and other travel nurses who are always down to go and do whatever, because that's literally what they're there to do. Like they're on the same page as us. Like they want to go and explore and do things. So they're always down to go for a drink or whatever. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying, like you do create your own little small tribe there in each place. Like I totally relate with that. Like each location, like I always think like, oh, if I go visit the city, like I know these people there now. Like it's so cool to have that.
That is so cool. And you have these people who understand something that nobody else could ever understand unless you've lived it. You know, like we can go travel and visit locations, but you don't understand what it's like to be a travel nurse. You don't understand what it's like to live somewhere and move every 3 months. And like to have that common ground is so cool, to be able to build these like little mini tribes, I guess, if you want to call them that. I love that you said too, kind of about growing and reassessing your goals. I think that's something along the journey that is also super important. Like I read these quotes or these like memes online all the time, and it's like, I've changed or you've changed. And it's like, yes, I hope I've changed. You don't want to be the same person. And I think there's a stigma around that when people in society say, oh my goodness, you've changed. And it really is such a positive thing, because that means you've grown and you've learned, you know? Yeah, so kind of reassessing your goals allows you to reflect on that and realize like, holy cow, I've grown myself, but we've grown as a couple in this too.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, when we think back to like those little times of frustration or whatever, it's like in hindsight, like those little obstacles, they're like so minimal, and like the overall view of everything, like all the positives definitely outweigh those little negatives. And like those little negatives, they create like good fun memories, because we're like, how ridiculous was that happened? Like you just laugh about it afterwards. So it's like also worth it when you look at the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And it's cool that you have someone to laugh about it with, and that you can laugh about it. You know, it's hard to do. But that kind of brings me to what I wanted to end on and talk about. And that's why I wanted to invite you to do this episode. Is I read your rose-colored glasses blog post, and I loved your perspective on it, because as we know, it's been a rough time going through a world pandemic, and it's like new territory for all of us. And there's a lot of negativity out there, a lot of negativity on the news. And you guys have seemed to find a lot of joy and happiness. And I feel like I've found that, and it's hard not to feel guilty being happy right now, right? Like, so, and there's just so many lessons in this. I almost feel like this was needed. So what do you think, based on your blog posts and just your personal thoughts, like what has this time shown us and taught us, and how do we embrace these weird times?
It has been a crazy time. Like everything kind of has changed, you know, for everybody. Like every single person is being affected by this right now. You know, there's not one single person who's just living their life as they were. There's no way. And I think it's so important, like thinking about it, for us to realize that life won't go back to how it was. Like, I've noticed a lot of people focusing on like wanting to get back to normal, whatever normal was, or like how it was before. But it's so important to just realize like it's not going to be the same after this. Like the economy, healthcare, so many different things are changing, and it's going to be different. And I think it's so important to just accept that. And like many people right now, like Colin and I have been working on different ways to like improve things, like either with ourselves, like creating new habits and like getting into a better lifestyle that we have been wanting to do and just either haven't had the time or just the effort and motivation to do it. Like, we're trying to take this time to really focus on that and like hone in our skills and just kind of make yourself better, because either way we're coming out of this, so you might as well come out better.
Right. That's so true. And I feel like for me, it's felt like sometimes life was just going so fast and I had these things that I wanted to do. Like even the podcast, I've wanted to do this for a long time. And it's just like, you wish that things could just stop and pause. Like you could pause the world and for a second you can like go run and get ahead. And then it's like, okay, let's resume. And that's how this has felt like for me. And so you kind of mentioned accepting the new normal.
I think it's important to realize the little things like pollution and fumes from like the world staying at home, you know? I think it's definitely helping. We've been focusing on like ways to lower our footprint and things like that and reducing our dependency on the grid and stuff. Like we've been talking about wanting to build and like make our garden better in our backyard, like actually producing our own vegetables and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's so much like beyond the time and the personal growth, like from a planetary perspective, it's like Mother Earth is able to heal right now.
I feel like I've been seeing so many things about like animals coming out into areas that they normally don't because people aren't like either driving there or, you know, the pollution isn't as bad. So they're like coming out of where they normally hang out. And I think that says something in itself. Like
it does.
What we're doing is very good for the environment, you know, and we should try and continue that and realize like, okay, what we've been doing clearly isn't helping the environment. We need to change that and continue on the path we are right now.
So I think that's kind of the perfect note to end on today. And thank you for getting out of your comfort zone and sharing this. And go check out Colleen's blog, Join the Journey. The link is posted in the description. And I hope that you guys got some good takeaways about how to embrace the journey from someone who absolutely has been embracing all her travels and her journey. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Chloe. It was fun.